morning sunlight filtered through the towering oak trees, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Westwood Manor. The estate had been in the Monroe family for generations, its sprawling gardens and grandiose structure a testament to hard work, dedication, and legacy. But to me, Catherine Monroe, this place was more than just a house. It was my sanctuary. A sanctuary I had carved out of a world that had once threatened to break me. The sun's golden rays glinted off the windows of the manor, catching the glimmer of my husband's legacy. But he was gone now, passed away 5 years ago, leaving me with the weight of this sprawling empire and the memories of a life built from the ground up. I ran my fingers over the edge of the old mahogany table in the kitchen, the one I had once shared with him, the one where we had celebrated victories and mourned losses. The walls of this house had seen it all. Success, failure. But what they hadn't seen, what I refused to let them see, was the loneliness that settled in my bones. After decades of climbing the corporate ladder, being the best damn lawyer in New York, I had retired to this place. Not for peace, but for silence. A silence I longed for. A silence where I could hear myself think again. And yet, as the kitchen clock ticked steadily toward noon, the silence was interrupted. A knock at the door echoed through the vast halls, sharp and unwelcome. My stomach churned as I opened it to find my son Ethan standing there flashing his signature grin, the one that used to melt my heart when he was a little boy. Now it was just another mask. A mask of someone who had long outgrown me. He was dressed in his usual tech-chic attire-tailored blazer, no tie, perfectly fitting jeans. His aura screamed success, yet somehow it left me hollow. "Mom, got a minute?" He asked, his voice casual, but with an edge I didn't like. "Of course," I replied, trying to keep my tone even, masking the irritation that bubbled up inside me. He stepped in his expensive cologne, wafting into the air, a stark contrast to the earthy scent of the vineyard that had been my constant companion for years. He flopped down onto one of the high-backed chairs in the kitchen, his demeanor relaxed as if this were any other visit. I couldn't help but notice the subtle tension in his shoulders, like he was already bracing for something. I didn't know what that something was yet, but I had a feeling. "You remember Sophie, right, my wife?" he asked, but I already knew. Sophie, his beautiful, ambitious socialite wife who lived for the spotlight. I had never quite understood what drew Ethan to her. She was everything he was becoming, shallow, attention-seeking, materialistic. But I kept those thoughts to myself. For the sake of peace, I had never interfered in their marriage, no matter how much I wanted to. "Yes, of course. How is she?" I asked, my voice distant despite the warmth of the words. Ethan smiled briefly, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Great. Actually, she's been busy planning something big, Mom. We were hoping you'd be on board," he said, leaning back in his chair. His casual tone was at odds with the heaviness that hung in the air. I waited for him to elaborate, but he didn't, so I raised an eyebrow, a silent invitation for him to continue. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "So Sophie and I were thinking about having our wedding here, at the manor. We've already sent out the invites, hired the vendors. It's going to be huge. Think social media influencers, major press. We're expecting hundreds of guests. It'll be perfect, Mom." He grinned again, but this time I didn't return it. I blinked, my mind racing to make sense of what I was hearing. "You're having your wedding here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The shock was still settling in like the first drops of a storm that would soon pour down. Ethan's smile faded slightly at the edge of my tone, but he waved it off. "Yeah, we just figured it would be the perfect location. I mean, the estate is gorgeous and it's got history. We thought it'd be great for the wedding photos, you know. People will be talking about it for years." He leaned forward as if to convince me with his words, but I could already feel the anger simmering beneath my skin. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I let the silence settle between us like a thick fog. How could he be so casual? How could he just assume I built this estate? I fought for every inch of it. It was my legacy, my sanctuary, not some backdrop for his latest spectacle. I finally said, my voice steady but firm. And when exactly were you planning on telling me about this? Ethan's expression shifted slightly, confusion crossing his face. Well, we figured you'd be thrilled, Mom. I mean, it's a big event and it'll bring attention to the estate, right? Thrilled. Was he serious? My fists clenched at my sides, the words I had kept buried for years, threatening to spill over. For years, I had built this estate from nothing, working long hours in the courtroom, fighting for my clients and making enough money to buy a piece of the world. But Ethan and Sophie had always treated it as something to be used as if they were entitled to it, without a second thought. I swallowed back the rising bitterness. Ethan, this is my home, I said slowly, my eyes narrowing slightly. My property, my legacy. And you and Sophie have just decided that you're going to turn it into a circus without even asking me. He looked taken aback, blinking rapidly. Mom, come on, we didn't think you'd mind. It's not like we're asking you to do much. You'll just need to make sure everything's ready here, maybe cook for the family, and no. The word slipped out before I could stop it. No, you've crossed a line. This is not just your playground, Ethan, it's mine. And if you think for 1 second that you can treat this place like some kind of stage for your self-centered spectacle, then you've made a huge mistake. Ethan recoiled slightly, as though my words had physically struck him. Sophie's voice echoed in my mind, urging him to act as if this was all his. But today I wasn't going to be the passive, quiet mother. Today I was going to take control. You're not having your wedding here, I said, my voice gaining strength with every word, at least not without my say-so. If you want to use my property, you're going to have to consult me first. And if you want a wedding here, you'll be paying for it. This estate is not free for the taking. Ethan stood up suddenly, his face flushed. You can't do this, Mom. We've already planned everything. People are coming from all over. Oh, I can, I said calmly, standing tall. And I will. You'll find another venue, Ethan. If you need it, I'll help you find one. But my estate is not a stage for your ego. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the woman who always bowed to family demands. In that moment, as Ethan stared at me, mouth slightly open in disbelief, I felt the full weight of my years of sacrifice, hard work, and self-respect. I had spent so long giving. Now it was my turn to take back control, and I was ready to fight for it. The air in the kitchen seemed to thicken as Ethan stood there, motionless, a storm brewing in his eyes. The silence that stretched between us was heavy, charged with the unspoken words that neither of us was willing to say. His disbelief mixed with anger was written across his face, but beneath it I could sense something else, something that I hadn't anticipated: fear. For the first time in our lives, he was facing me, truly facing me. Not as a mother whose opinions could be dismissed with a wave of his hand, but as a woman whose decisions held power. I wasn't sure what surprised me more, the realization that I had the strength to stand up to my son after all these years, or the fact that he had never truly seen me as anything other than an obstacle to his plans. I had spent decades molding myself into someone who could be relied upon, someone who was always there for her family, always willing to sacrifice her own happiness for theirs. It was the life I had chosen, or rather, the life that had chosen me. But now, standing in my kitchen, I realized how long I had been living in the shadows of my own life, allowing Ethan and Sophie to walk all over me, because I was afraid of confronting the truth. They didn't respect me. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his mouth twisting into a sneer. You're serious, aren't you? He asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. Mom, you're really going to make this a fight over what, some damn wedding? His words stung, but I didn't flinch. I had been fighting battles in the courtroom for years. The smallest of insults no longer had the power to cut me. This was different. This was personal. I'm serious, Ethan. I said, my voice steady but resolute. This estate is mine. You don't get to use it like it's a free venue for your convenience. I built this place with my own hands, my sweat, my sacrifices. It means something to me. It's not a backdrop for your latest event. Cinta, the words were harsh, but they tasted sweet on my tongue, like a release I didn't know I needed. Finally, I was saying what I should have said years ago. I watched as his face contorted with frustration. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, cutting him off. Don't you dare try to guilt-trip me, Ethan. You've been using me in this house for too long. I've let you get away with it, but no more. My voice grew louder, more forceful each word, a declaration of my newfound resolve. You have no idea what I've sacrificed to keep this estate going, to maintain your lifestyle, to keep everyone happy. And for what? To be treated like I'm invisible? Ethan's jaw clenched his fists, bawling at his sides. Sophie, who had been standing in the background watching with wide eyes, finally stepped forward, her lips painted in the perfect shade of red, but her expression was anything but perfect. She was scared not of me, but of what this meant for her. This wasn't just about Ethan. This was about their entire world crumbling down. If I refused to let them use my property, it would shatter the image of perfection they had so carefully cultivated. You're being unreasonable. Catherine Sophie's voice dripped with the kind of sweet venom that only someone with her kind of privilege could muster. This is your son's wedding. Do you really want to be the villain in this story? Do you want everyone to know you were the one who ruined the celebration? Her words hit me like a slap, but I refused to back down. I don't care about being the villain, Sophie. I care about being respected. For once, I want you to see me as a person, not as a tool you can use whenever it suits you. I am your mother-in-law, and I deserve respect. I'm not some servant you can boss around. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Ethan looked at Sophie, his eyes pleading for her to intervene, but I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. He'd never taken me seriously before, had never fully understood the sacrifices I had made for him for this family. It was always easier to dismiss me, to treat me as a means to an end, but now that crutch was gone. I'm not canceling the event, Ethan, and I'm not letting you use my home for free. If you want to have a wedding here, you'll pay for it and you'll follow my terms, I said, my voice unwavering. I've made enough sacrifices in my life. I'm done. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Ethan just stared at me as if he couldn't quite comprehend what I was saying. It was as if he had been living in a world where his mother was always there for him, always accommodating, always willing to bend for his sake. But now that world was collapsing. And it wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about who had control over the things that mattered. You don't get it, do you? Ethan finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. This isn't just about the wedding. This is about everything. You're trying to take something from me. This is my legacy, too. My future. You think you can just shut me out of everything I'm entitled to. I felt a cold chill run down my spine, but I refused to flinch. This wasn't about legacy. This wasn't about entitlement. This was about power. Ethan had been living his life as if everything was owed to him, as if the world would just bend to his will. But today he was facing the consequences of that mindset. Entitled, I asked, my voice almost a whisper. You think you're entitled to this place. You've never once asked for my permission, never once considered how hard I've worked to keep it all together. You don't get to take this, Ethan. Not anymore. I could see the shift in his eyes, the recognition that he had lost, that I was not the woman he thought I was. I wasn't just his mother anymore. I was Catherine Monroe, the owner of Westwood Manor, the woman who had fought for every inch of this land. Fine. Ethan said, his voice cold and flat. If that's how you want to play it, then fine. You'll regret this, Mom. I'll make sure you regret it. He turned on his heel and walked out, Sophie trailing behind him, but I didn't feel the rush of victory that I thought I would. Instead, I felt something else, something more powerful. I felt liberated. The house felt quieter after they left, the echoes of their footsteps fading as I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the spot where my son had just been. I was done living in their shadows, done being the backdrop to their lives. From this moment on, I would live for myself. I would reclaim my space, my power, and my future. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about winning. It was about respect. And for the first time in my life, I had taken a stand. The road ahead would be long, but it was mine to walk. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft golden light over the vineyards, I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands trembling slightly. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was my silence. And in it, I finally found peace. The next few days were an uneasy mix of tension and silence. Ethan and Sophie didn't return for any of their usual visits, nor did they call. I knew they were stewing, trying to come up with a way to salvage their wedding plans. I had no doubt they were angry, hurt, and possibly plotting their next move, but I didn't care. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back now. For so long, I had been their silent enabler, the one who bent to their whims without question. But not anymore. This was my moment, and it felt strange, like standing on a precipice, looking out over the unknown, unsure of what would come next, but knowing that I couldn't turn back. I spent the next few days going through the motions of my usual routine. The vineyard needed tending, the estate required upkeep, and I found comfort in those tasks. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just rushing through the motions. I was taking my time. The old oak trees needed pruning, and the vines were heavy with the promise of a fruitful harvest. It was my life's work, the product of decades of sacrifice. My husband, God rest his soul, had been the dreamer. He had envisioned a future in the vineyard long before I came into the picture, and it was only after his death that I realized how much of my own future was wrapped up in these rolling hills. This estate had become my anchor in a world that had been full of transience, and now standing on the balcony of the manor, I could finally breathe without feeling like I was suffocating under the weight of others' expectations. The phone rang late that afternoon. I almost didn't pick it up, but something in my gut told me it was time. I grabbed the receiver and held it to my ear, my fingers tightening around it as I prepared myself for what was about to come. Hello. My voice was steady, but beneath the calm, I could hear the beat of my heart in my ears. It was Ethan. His voice, though, still edged with frustration, was laced with something else. Something that made me pause. Was it humility? A crack in his arrogance that I hadn't seen before. Mom, he started his words, slow measured. We need to talk. This can't go on. The wedding is our day, and we've already made the plans. You're making this impossible. His tone had lost some of its edge, replaced with a calmness that bordered on desperation. I couldn't help but feel a flicker of something in my chest. Was it empathy? A longing to fix things. I steeled myself. This wasn't about fixing things anymore. It was about standing firm in what I had built and demanding respect. I'm not changing my mind, Ethan, I said, keeping my voice even. The event is happening, and you're going to have to find another venue for your wedding. It's too late now. I heard him inhale sharply, a sound filled with disbelief and anger. Then his voice lowered quieter, almost pleading. Mom, you've got to understand this wedding is everything to me and Sophie. People are flying in from all over the country. We've already spent thousands sent out invitations. You can't just cancel everything for the sake of your pride. His words stung, but they didn't break me. No amount of guilt, no matter how carefully wrapped in his soft tone, would make me budge. It's not about pride, Ethan. It's about boundaries. It's about respect. I said my voice calm, but the steel was there. You've treated me in this estate like props in your life, and I'm done letting you get away with it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear him sorting through his emotions, trying to figure out how to get the upper hand. It used to be so easy for him to manipulate me with a smile, a joke, a tear, but not anymore. "I don't know how you expect me to make this work," Ethan said, his voice tinged with frustration. "I don't get it. Why are you doing this? I'm your son." "Exactly." I said my words cutting through the air like a blade. "You're my son, and you haven't respected me for years. It's time for you to understand that this isn't just your inheritance. It's my life. It's my work. You want to turn it into a circus, but I won't let you. Not anymore." Another long silence stretched out between us. I could feel the weight of it on both sides, the divide that had grown between us, like a chasm too wide to cross, with a few words. I had thought about this moment for years, but now that it was here, I wasn't sure how I felt. I felt liberated, yes, but also a little empty. I had just severed a part of myself, a part that had always been so desperate for my son's approval. But there was no more room for that in my life. I couldn't be the mother who catered to every whim, every demand. Not anymore. "I'll figure it out," Ethan finally said, his voice quieter, almost defeated. "But you better believe this isn't over, Mom. We'll find a way to make you regret this." The words felt like a final shot, a last desperate plea for power. But I didn't flinch. "Good luck, Ethan, and don't ever call me again unless you can respect me." I hung up before he could say anything else, the silence that followed settling over me like a thick fog. For a moment, I wasn't sure whether I had made the right choice, but I knew one thing for sure: it was too late to turn back. That evening after the phone call, I walked out onto the porch, my hands clutching the railing as I gazed out over the sprawling vineyard. The sun was setting in the distance, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the land. It was a breathtaking sight, and for a moment I felt small in its presence, not in a defeated way, but in a humbling way. This land, this estate, was older than me. It had witnessed countless storms, endured seasons of both drought and abundance. It had endured because it had purpose. I had purpose. And in that moment, I knew that I would endure too. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls, emails, and meetings with the corporate event planners. I was determined to show Ethan and Sophie that Westwood Manor had a legacy that went beyond them, that my vision for this place was about more than weddings and parties. It was about creating something lasting, something of real value. I refused to let them treat it like it was disposable, like it was theirs to control. As the wedding day approached, I could feel the tension in the air. I could sense it in the way the workers walked a little slower, the way the landscapers would glance at each other nervously when they saw me overseeing their work. It wasn't just me they were nervous about. It was the change in the atmosphere, the shift in the balance of power. I was no longer the passive woman behind the scenes. I was the force that would determine how this story ended. On the day of the wedding, as I stood on the balcony overlooking the estate, I saw the luxury cars rolling up the long, winding driveway. Guests in elegant suits and gowns, the familiar hum of chatter filling the air, but not for a wedding. No, this was a corporate gala. The guests, CEOs and business moguls, didn't know it yet, but they were about to experience something they hadn't bargained for. I stood there watching it all unfold. The grand marquee had been set up near the vineyard tables, gleaming with white tablecloths and silver cutlery. The servers began to set up the elaborate food stations, and the sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. I could feel the satisfaction rising in my chest. Ethan and Sophie had no idea what was coming. When they finally arrived, I saw the shock in their faces as they walked up the path, ready for their wedding, only to find the estate transformed into something else entirely. The tension in their faces was palpable, the realization that their plans had been derailed so thoroughly. They stopped in their tracks, both of them looking around in disbelief. "I'm sorry, but the estate has already been rented for the day." I said, my voice steady as I walked up to them. I had no need to explain. They both knew exactly who was responsible for this. "You'll need to find another venue for your wedding. I hope you understand." They stared at me speechless for what felt like an eternity. But then something changed. It wasn't just anger or frustration. It was understanding. A small shift in their eyes, a flicker of realization that this wasn't just about the wedding. It was about respect. And for the first time, I saw a glimpse of the son I had raised a man who could finally understand the value of what I had fought for all these years. It wasn't too late. This story was still mine to write. And as I turned to walk back into the house, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The days that followed were like walking through a fog. Ethan and Sophie didn't return my calls, nor did they show up at the estate for the next few weeks. It was like they had disappeared, evaporating into the air, leaving me in the silence I had longed for. The quiet, however, wasn't comforting anymore. It felt like the stillness of something broken, a connection, a family, a life that I had spent so many years building only to see it crumble in the wake of one unheeded decision. I had done what I thought was right. I had stood my ground. But as the days stretched on, I found myself questioning if I had done it for the right reasons. Was I just seeking control in a world that had left me behind? Had I made the right choice? Or had I alienated my son for nothing more than pride? The weight of those questions pressed on me as I walked through the corridors of Westwood Manor. Every room held memories, moments of laughter and love, of late-night talks with my late husband about the future, of Ethan running through the halls as a child, his excited voice filling the space. Now those memories seemed distant, almost foreign, like they belonged to someone else. I spent my mornings with the vineyard running through the same rituals I had grown accustomed to. The workers in the fields greeted me with polite nods, though I could see the careful distance in their eyes. It wasn't just me they were hesitant around, it was the looming change in the air. The vineyard, once a symbol of my hard-won peace, now felt like the last thread of something I couldn't fully grasp. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed, and I wasn't entirely sure where it had gone wrong. But one thing was clear: I had made the decision, and there was no turning back. No matter how heavy the loneliness pressed down on me, no matter how much I longed for the old days, the one thing I couldn't afford to do was look back. Looking back was what had gotten me into this mess in the first place. Then one afternoon, just as I was returning from overseeing some maintenance in the vineyards, I saw Ethan's car pull up in front of the manor. It was strange, almost surreal. I had imagined this moment 100 times, what I would say to him, what I would do when he finally came back. But seeing him in person standing outside my door made everything feel more real. He was no longer the boy I had raised. He wasn't even the man I had seen last. There was something different in his face, something that made my stomach tighten. His expression was serious, devoid of the arrogance I had grown accustomed to. And it was then that I realized that he wasn't here to argue or manipulate me. He was here to face the consequences of his actions. I stood at the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest, wondering if he was finally going to see the weight of the choices he had made, the weight I had carried for so long. "Mom," he said, his voice calm but strained, like he was trying to find the right words. "Can we talk?" I studied his face for a long moment before stepping aside to let him in. I didn't speak at first. I didn't know what to say. I had spent so many years protecting him, forgiving him, letting him walk all over me. But now I was no longer that woman. I wasn't the mother who gave everything without ever asking for anything in return. This was a different version of me, one that had learned the hard way that respect wasn't something you earned by giving everything away. "I'm listening," I said. Finally, my voice steady, betraying none of the emotions that were swirling within me. Ethan walked in, slowly looking around the room as though he was seeing it for the first time. He seemed so small, so lost in the vastness of the house that had once been a symbol of our family's power. He sat down on one of the chairs by the fireplace, and for a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. The cocky confidence was gone, replaced by something quieter, more vulnerable. "I screwed up," he said, looking at the floor. "I know that. I never should have treated you the way I did, and I should have asked you before making decisions about the estate. Sophie and we got caught up in the image and what we thought we deserved. I thought I was doing something good, something big, but I didn't see the bigger picture. I didn't see you. I didn't see what this place meant to you, what you've been through to keep it going. I didn't get it, Mom. I didn't get you." His words hung in the air, and for a long moment I couldn't bring myself to respond. The weight of everything, all the years I had spent trying to hold my family together, the sacrifices, the loneliness hit me with such force that I felt winded. Ethan had never really seen me before, not in the way I needed him to. He had never understood what it took to build something from nothing, to stand tall in a world that constantly tried to push you down. I don't know what to say. He continued, his voice trembling just slightly now. "I don't know how to make this right. I've been a terrible son, but I want to fix it. I want to do better. I don't know if I can ever make up for the way I treated you, but I'm trying. I want to help." I looked at him, trying to read his face. This wasn't the bratty, entitled kid who had demanded my estate for his wedding. This wasn't the son who had walked all over me without ever giving a second thought to what I had given him. This was a man who was finally seeing the value of the legacy I had built. This was the realization I had been waiting for, but it came too late. "I don't know if you can fix it." I said, my voice softer now. "I don't know if I can just forget how you've treated me, how you've treated this place. I've given you everything. And I've done it because I thought you needed it, that you needed to feel it. But you didn't. You just took, and that's something I can't fix for you." He looked up at me, his eyes brimming with regret. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can change, to prove that I understand now, that I see what this place means to you, what it represents. I want to be a part of it, not just as your son, but as someone who understands what you've done for us." The sincerity in his words cut through the years of resentment I had carried. It didn't erase the pain, but it opened a door I hadn't realized was there. A door that led to a future where maybe we could rebuild something. Not just a relationship, but trust. "I don't know, Ethan," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I need time, but I will give you a chance. Not just for me, but for you, for us." He nodded, his face softening with a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Thank you, Mom. That's all I want. A chance to make things right." And for the first time in years, I believed him. There was no quick fix, no magical solution to undo the hurt. But maybe, just maybe we could start again. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing. The legacy of Westwood Manor wouldn't be the only thing I was leaving behind. As Ethan stood to leave, he gave me a small smile, genuine this time. "I'll make it up to you, I promise." When he stepped out of the door, the weight that had been on my chest for so long lifted, even if just a little. I stood by the window and watched as he got into his car, the driveway stretching out before him like a path to something new. For the first time in years, I felt hope. It wasn't the same kind of hope I had once felt when I first built this estate, but it was a start. A new chapter was beginning, one where maybe respect and understanding would replace the distance and neglect. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its final rays over the vineyards, I knew that the story of Westwood Manor wasn't over. It had only just begun. The days that followed were a strange mix of reflection and cautious optimism. The silence I had longed for seemed to fill the house, but now it was different. It wasn't just an absence of noise. It was a space where change could breathe. Ethan's visit had left a mark on me. He hadn't been the arrogant, entitled son I had grown used to. Instead, he had shown something I had longed to see, the first real sign that he understood what I had fought for. It was a small shift, but it felt monumental. And yet, despite this glimpse of progress, I couldn't help but wonder what it all meant. Was this the beginning of a new chapter, or just another fleeting moment of clarity, before everything fell back into the same patterns I kept myself busy in the days that followed, as I had always done? The vineyards required attention, and there was always something that needed fixing around the manor. I spent hours in the fields, the earthy smell of the soil grounding me, reminding me of the long years I had spent cultivating this place. Each vine was a testament to my hard work, each row of grapes a symbol of the sacrifices I had made. But even as I tended to the estate, my thoughts kept drifting back to Ethan, to the possibility of healing the rift that had grown between us. Could I really forgive him? Could we rebuild what had been broken? The phone call came on a quiet Thursday afternoon. I was sitting on the porch, the soft rustling of the leaves in the wind, the only sound that filled the air. The sun was low on the horizon, casting a golden hue over the vineyard. I hadn't heard from Ethan since our last conversation, and I had started to think maybe he was just giving me the space I had asked for. But then the phone rang, and I knew it was him before I even saw the caller ID. Hello? I answered, my voice steady, but not without the tremor of anticipation. Mom, Ethan said, his voice warmer than I had heard it in years. I know you said you needed time, but I wanted to talk to you. I've been thinking a lot about everything about us, about what you said. I know I've messed up, and I know it's going to take more than a few words to fix things, but I want to try. I'm sorry for everything, Mom, for not respecting you, for taking you for granted. His words hung in the air, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. I had expected this, but hearing him say it out loud, hearing the sincerity in his voice, stirred something deep inside me. It was the first real apology I had received from him, the first time he had taken full responsibility for his actions. And for the first time, I felt something inside me stir that I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I'm listening, I said quietly, my fingers gripping the phone tighter as I tried to hold on to the calm that was rapidly slipping away. I know I've let you down. He continued, his voice tinged with the kind of regret I had hoped for. I thought I knew what was best for me, for Sophie, for all of us. But I was wrong. I've been selfish, and I haven't taken the time to really understand what you've gone through, what you've built. I know you've spent your whole life working to make sure we had everything we needed, and I took that for granted. I don't want to be that person anymore. The vulnerability in his words was almost too much to bear. My son, the man who had been so sure of himself, so wrapped up in his own world, was finally acknowledging the truth. It was painful to hear, but it was also something I had been waiting for, the moment when he would truly see the weight of what I had carried for so long. I've been working with a business consultant, he said, his tone shifting slightly. I want to take this vineyard seriously, Mom. I want to understand it. I want to help. Not because I have to, but because I want to. I don't know how you did it all these years, but I'm ready to learn. I want to help you if you'll let me. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. For so long, I had believed that Ethan was lost to me, that I had failed him in some way. I had spent years trying to fix things, to mend the cracks in our relationship, but no amount of sacrifice or giving had ever brought us closer. Now here he was, offering something different, a chance to rebuild, a chance to change. You're going to have to prove it, I said, softly, my voice steady. I'm not going to forget everything that's happened, Ethan, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't hurt, but I'm willing to try if you are. I want to see that you're serious about this, about respecting me, and about respecting this estate. It's not just a business, it's my life. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment I wasn't sure if he had heard me. But then his voice came through low and sincere. I understand, Mom. I'll prove it to you. I'll do whatever it takes. And for the first time in years, I believed him. The weeks that followed were an adjustment for both of us. Ethan didn't just come in and take over. He didn't try to impose his ideas or push me aside. Instead, he showed up every day learning. He spent hours in the vineyard learning the ropes, asking questions, taking notes. He wanted to understand the complexities of what I had built, and he respected the work that went into it. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when old patterns tried to resurface, when Ethan's old sense of entitlement crept in. But it was different now. It was different because Ethan was listening. He was showing up, and that was enough for me to begin to trust him again. We worked side by side in the vineyard, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about the past, but mostly about the future. We began to set goals for the estate, to make plans for expanding the business, for turning the vineyard into something sustainable and profitable. We hired new staff, brought in consultants, and even started looking into organic certification. For the first time, Ethan wasn't just trying to take the reins, he was working alongside me, contributing in a way I hadn't expected. And slowly, I started to see the man I had raised, the one who had always had potential, but never quite understood how to channel it. But it wasn't just the estate that was changing. It was us. As we worked together, we began to talk more openly about our past, about what had gone wrong, about the hurt we had both carried. We had long, honest conversations about the expectations I had placed on him, the way I had tried to protect him from the world without realizing that I was pushing him away. He admitted to the ways he had neglected me, to the times he had taken me for granted. But we didn't dwell on the past anymore. We started talking about the future, about what kind of relationship we wanted to have. The most surprising change, however, was in the way I began to see myself. For so long, I had defined myself by what I had done for others, by the sacrifices I had made. I had lived in the shadow of my own efforts, constantly trying to prove my worth to those around me. But as Ethan and I worked together, I started to see my value beyond the role of the mother, beyond the caretaker. I began to see myself as a woman who had fought for everything she had, a woman who had built something that mattered. I could feel the weight of the years lifting from my shoulders. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. I didn't need anyone's approval. I had spent too long living for other people, trying to meet their expectations. Now, for the first time in my life, I was living for myself. And in doing so, I had created the space for Ethan to come back to me, not as a son who needed fixing, but as a man who could stand beside me. It wasn't perfect, of course. We still had our challenges, and there were times when the old patterns reared their heads. But this time, they didn't have the power they once did. We were building something new, and though it wasn't without its struggles, it was something worth fighting for. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the vineyards, Ethan turned to me and said, "Mom, thank you for giving me a chance, for trusting me again." I looked at him, the weight of the years in my eyes, and smiled. "You earned it, Ethan, and I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us." And for the first time, I believed it. We were building something new, something better, something real. Life has a way of teaching us lessons, often through the toughest moments, the ones where we're pushed to our limits and forced to confront truths we'd rather avoid. In my own journey, I learned that respect is not something that can be assumed or given away freely. It must be earned, and it starts with respecting ourselves first. I spent years sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of others, and while it's natural to want to support the people we love, it's equally important to set boundaries and stand firm in our worth. I had to learn that the love I give should never come at the cost of my own dignity. If you're in a situation where you feel invisible or taken for granted, know this: you are allowed to speak up. You are allowed to take control of your life and demand the respect you deserve. It's not always easy. In fact, it can be incredibly hard. But the peace that comes with standing firm in your values and being true to yourself is worth it. And remember, the people who truly care for you will respect you even more for it. To those who are in a similar position trying to navigate difficult relationships or stand up for what you've worked so hard for, I see you. Keep going. Don't let fear or guilt stop you from living authentically. You deserve to be heard, to be valued, and to live on your terms. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this journey and the lessons you've learned along the way. How have you navigated difficult relationships, and what advice would you give to someone who's feeling unseen? Thank you for taking the time to read, and I hope my story resonates with you. Let's continue supporting each other in this journey of growth.